Thank you, everybody, for joining. So I'm Sean Richards. I'm head of Arizona operations for Vincit and oversee the marketing effort. So this event is part of what a group of us have worked to put on today. We're going to work to put on more in the future. But without going too much into Vincit, because we've already started that, I want to introduce our panel today. So our goal was to make sure and not talk about user experience, not talk about tech from our perspective, because as Vile said, that feels like selling. So we decided we'd rather have a group of experts that came in. Two of the panelists are from Vincit, that is true, but they came for a good reason because the experience they have really speaks volumes for what we do at Vincit, but we brought a few others as well. So quickly introduce the team, and then some of our questioning through this panel will kind of shed light a little bit more on what they do on a day-to-day basis as well. So first we've got Liz Magura. She is the creative director. I'm going to read some of this, just make sure I'm getting it right. But creative director for UX UI at the University of Phoenix. So she oversees a team of UI UX designers. She oversees quite a bit of the projects around web and mobile, and so focused on their students all the way through kind of joining the company or joining the University of Phoenix all the way through graduation and even into alumni, I believe. I'll let them explain a little bit more about their roles when we get into that. So welcome, Liz. Thank you for joining us. Next hot seat over is Austin Chauncey. And so he's a recent addition to Vincit, but has a lot of experience in our field. And so we were happy to have him join our company, a lot of experience in software development. And he'll go into a little bit more about that. He's maybe working on web applications, but dipping his toes in a few other areas already for us as well. So thank you, Austin, for joining. And then next hot seat, we've got Brittany Galella. She is the VP of Owned Media at Pinnacle Advertising, which is, in my opinion, a deceiving title because she, I think, wears a lot of hats as well, as many of us do, oversees a lot of applications around web and mobile and the execution of marketing using tools in the marketing space. So she's going to bring a lot of discussion around that in terms of marketing and other areas. So thank you, Brittany, for joining. Last, we've got Leah. She's also with us at Vincit. She's one of our UI UX designers. She has quite a few projects under her belt with a lot of notable companies here in the Arizona market and others. And she's got a really unique setup with us in terms of being able to focus on a broad array of web application, mobile development. She does a lot of consulting in terms of UI UX and user flows, but she'll go a little bit more into her role as well. So I don't want to do most of the talking. I'm going to ask the questions and let the conversation flow as it is. This is meant to be casual. It's meant to be fun. We'll engage you guys as the audience with some time in the end here. So, maybe raise your hand if you have a question towards the end, but I think as we'll let them speak about their experience. The idea here is to understand that we all work in a world where user experience is no longer about just visual design. There's technology that exists in our world that helps support deliver UI, UX, and visual design is a part of that. And then equally on the development side of our world, that our software engineers are making user experience decisions while they work through their user flows as well. They're having to kind of wear multiple hats and think about both ends, but all centered around decisions we're making as a team on a daily basis about user experience. How does the user perceive what we do in the end? And that's what our goals are in most of our projects. So that's the conversation we're going to have today. We hope you guys get something out of it. And with that, I will start off with the first question.
Maybe we should clap for Leah since she got left out.
Great applause.
I should have said that. That's what I should have said. So let me start off with the first question. And one, it's tell us a little bit more about your role, but specifically your role in terms of how you use user experience and technology as a combined effort to work on the things you do on a day-to-day basis, and especially how you see it as it empowers your possibilities of what you do. So how does tech empower your design, or how does user experience methodologies and thinking empower your software approach? So if anyone wants to start with that, I can start with Liz here and work down the line, or you can always volunteer too.
All right, I'll go.
Perfect.
So Liz Magura, creative director, overseeing our UX UI creative practice with the University of Phoenix. Actually designers and writers now this last year, and because of COVID, really, our organization, much like any other organization, I think in the country, went remote. So we really had to kind of shift gears, get everyone into their setups in their home offices, and really figure out how to bring our in-office culture into a remote setting. So we picked up, and I don't know, maybe everyone else has too, Miro we use a lot. Mural is another whiteboarding tool, but Miro has been a godsend. And it's kind of funny to see how long some of these tools have been around, but really haven't been leveraged as they could have over the last year. So I went from 2 UI designers last March to now having a team of almost 20 designers and writers, a manager under myself, and we're looking to hire 4 more designer position and 4 more on top of that to the end of the year. But I think really a lot of the technologies our organization have started to leverage, especially to speak to more of the user experience. Like my organization is very student focused. So our president will start any leadership calls with a story around a student. So it's really refreshing to see leadership really focused on who that student, who that user is. And from there, it's really up to our team. So we have, I don't know, 40 maybe agile teams throughout the organization. Some of them are student facing, some of them are platform teams. And really it's up to those teams to really bring user experiences to life, whether it's a prospective student, a currently enrolled student, an alumni, faculty, kind of across the board. So really it's been, I came across a quote and I want to say it's from Nielsen Norman Group, but user experience is everybody's responsibility. And that's really something we're adapting through the technologies and processes we've been utilizing.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm Austin Chauncey with the Vincit team, and I'm a software engineer. I work on a project called Chief, which is a women's executive networking app. It's sort of like a LinkedIn app where VP C-level women can log in. They can meet other women, talk about job opportunities, network, and then they also have some in-person locations that they call clubhouses, where they can host events. They can come and meet, come and work, co-work. And so yeah, as far as using modern technologies, I really liked your quote. What was it again?
User experience is everyone's responsibility.
Yeah, I really like that. But yeah, I think, and one of the powerful things I think about Vincit, Vincit's an agency style business model. So we contract projects through other companies. And one of the really powerful things about Vincit, I think, is that we do really like focus hard on using, whether it's modern tech stacks, so like using modern coding technologies, or modern like technologies like Miro, like Jira is pretty not as modern, but things like that still are very helpful. And we focus really hard on getting clients who are going to use those kind of things, who are going to use those modern technologies. So when we hand them off, they can find developers who are still familiar with those technologies and continue to improve on their product. If they choose to go another route, or if we keep building on it, all of our employees will be pretty familiar with those newer technologies, which is really nice. And not to sound too silly, I know we don't want to do that, but yeah, that's a bit about me.
I mean, you sold me on the Chief app, so I might have to go join that.
Absolutely.
Sounds interesting. But I'm Brittany Glello, so VP of Owned Media at Pinnacle Advertising. So Owned Media is basically everything in marketing that is not behind a paid ad. So that means website development, SEO, content strategy, analytics, email marketing, everything else that you could possibly, PR begrudgingly happens to fall under me now. But really what that means is, from a UI perspective, I'm trying to find the happy medium and the blend between web development and the technical aspects of that, content strategy, and how you make someone feel when they come to your website, and then SEO to make sure that you're findable. So really, I'm trying to build our team in a way where we're data informed through analytics and data and technology, but then also making sure that we're taking things into consideration like user intent and building really good user flows for any of our clients and the sites that we develop. So from a technology perspective, that's a tough sell. So I'm trying to find technologies that can help me really bridge the gap between bringing a technical discipline between how is this website technically built? Does it have everything that I need it? And then does it say the things that I need it to say? And is it going to help me grow where I need it to grow? And then thereafter, the fact our analytics team is layering in how are people interacting with that and what's the feedback that we're getting, and are people loyal or are they just buying and leaving? So there's for my job and my teams, there's a lot of really unique nuances that I feel like we've really just scratched the surface in terms of figuring out what technologies we use. Bright Edge is a really good tool that we found that kind of marries the technical aspect with content strategy and SEO, but I'm sure there's way more out there that we haven't quite explored yet.
Leah Sagawa, user interface and user experience designer for Vincit, Arizona. And just kind of, I do what Brittany just mentioned that she facilitates in her organization, but as a team, so the Arizona team is probably only very small. I would want to say maybe under 20 or maybe around 20 right now, but we kind of wear a lot of hats. So the design team, me included, we do anything ranging from creating applications to creating websites. We work very closely with our developers to try to figure out what kind of technology that we're going to implement into the solutions that we find that's also within line with the budget with our clients and our stakeholders. We have designers that, me included, we have 4 designers, and everybody kind of brings something to the table. We have designers that have an emphasis in animation and videography and photography skills in addition to user interface and user experience design and some coding. We have some people that are proficient really in illustration in addition to digital design and traditional design in addition to digital design, excuse me. But that being said, even just the 4 of us, I mean, we have a very powerful team. We collaborate using lots of different kinds of platforms. I mean, Miro Board is one of them. We use Slack. We have a lot of collaborative tools that we use to talk to clients or whether we talk to each other, sharing work. Right now, we're designing in Figma, which as long as you've got a subscription, everybody can kind of be in there at the same time. There's times when I could be working on a project with another designer and we're both in there and he's working on a section and I'm working on a section and we're on the phone on Slack and we're going back and forth being like, okay, what font did you use? Okay, I need to do that. What size is that? Okay, this. And you just see the mouses go back and forth. So, and then sometimes you see developers in there too, already starting to go ahead and plan the back end code for what they're about to implement. And then kind of another thing that's interesting about our team is because we are so small, we have a really tight relationship with every department within Vincit, Arizona. So there's a lot of talks with the developers on a daily basis about how they want to see something work and how you describe it, or even with the marketing team and how you're trying to envision what they're trying to do for maybe a landing page or some sort of advertisement or some social media. So it's really almost nice to have more of a family environment in this agency where we all kind of help each other out and we all do the best that we can to deliver what we know about to each other and then just build each other up and eventually, build up the company as well. So, yeah.
I think it might be helpful to know like how many people here are developers. Sweet. And how many are UX, UI designers? Sweet. And then we got some management type roles, or what's everyone else? Yeah. And then just a few spectators. Oh, this guy. Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to.
There's a few of us that have the gift of gab, but not the design or the development skills. That's a few of us, but it's a really good point. And even bringing up the tools like Miro and Figma, and the premise of both of those is just more collaboration and actually bringing designers and developers together more, right? I think we can all agree that the more they're actually talking to each other, the better the outcomes are. And I think that's been the evolution for a while now. So my next question for you guys is, we have seen, I think maybe even in the last 4 to 5 years that I've noticed, that designers and the inclusion of design strategy has played a significantly larger role than it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're seeing this in the difficulty of finding certain talent in different markets. We're finding it in the salaries that are being requested for these roles are starting to match, typically like development role type salaries. We're seeing the skill sets broadened across more areas than just visual execution. So where do you see the future of design designers and design strategy and the inclusion of actually building solutions for customers. I know today we're already evolved, but where do you see this in a couple of years? Let's start with Leah on that end. We'll go
Well, I
backwards.
think user experience is the experience that a user has when they interact with your product. So as a user experience designer, you get to determine what that experience is. And because, there's so many different kinds of ways to appeal to different people now, there's a lot of emotions and behaviors that everybody's looking at, that are hyper-focused on at times, that there's augmented virtual reality, there's, chatbots, there's different things. And so when you think about how we are tracking human behavior and the emotions that users have, I can only see this going so far where we can really create experiences for them, and maybe even just not even being designing an interface, because that's part of emotion and that's part of the experience, but even getting creative with the design strategy. It doesn't have to be just because it's out there and it's good and there's other things that you can do, doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself to what's already existing. Sometimes you just got to say like, oh, well, what if we did something like that? And just those tiny questions are the things that make things huge eventually,
I agree with that. I think there's, in my world, I mean, a lot of what I do is focused on not just the customer acquisition and not just that conversion point, but it's what happens afterwards. And I feel like that's often sometimes something that gets overlooked in UI design and in design strategy. So you're designing and you're strategizing around getting the person to do that one thing that you need them to do, but then what happens after the fact? And I think Liz actually has a really good experience in terms of just like longevity. Like if you're working with a student and they're there for 4 or 5 years, that doesn't just end when they decide to be a student. It goes beyond that and it continues beyond that. And I think there's a lot of brands, I mean, even brands that I work with now, where they're an e-commerce brand and they're so focused on that conversion point, like get the customer, that they lose sight of what that feels like and what the emotions are after someone has purchased a product from you. So I hope that as we evolve, that there's more focus on the what happens next, because that's still an area where I feel like there is more to be explored, and there's really more that we can tap into from a behavior and an emotion standpoint as to why people are loyal to certain brands versus others, and what that experience is like after the actual point of purchase.
Yeah, I think the two categories for me would be kind of like less code and more data are kind of the two paths. So for more data, there's so many tools out there that allow us to track every single like individual user movement. So like whether they're clicking a button, we can track, there's a tool called Hotjar, Hotjar, that we can track exactly where a user's mouse goes, and we can track exactly where they click, and we can track their journey through the entire application. And there's other tools that do kind of similar things. And so that's extremely helpful for understanding maybe where a user is getting lost in a checkout journey or things of that nature. And then also on the less code side, there's like these tools are getting more mature and getting to a stage where you can use them for more like intensive applications, where they're low code tools that you can like piece together little blocks that almost like a UX designer who might not know a lot about individual coding languages, things of that nature, they can go in and build interfaces for certain applications and build the entire like data platform around it. A big tool for that's called Webflow, Webflow. They have a lot of really powerful things, from accepting like form submissions to storing all sorts of data you could imagine. And a few years ago, those tools were still elementary and didn't have a whole lot of use. Like you could maybe design a marketing page, or you could design like a simple sort of landing page, but to build an actual application that's saving users' data, allowing them to log in, things of that nature, those tools are kind of getting close to getting to that point, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I think for my organization, I've been there now for about 5 years, and it's kind of crazy how different each year has felt, from just starting out as a senior UX UI designer in marketing, but not working on anything relative to marketing, working on like our student portal or our application process. And then kind of working my way into this creative director role, where for the longest time, the organization didn't really have any idea what any of the teams were working on. Leadership would just be like, okay, these things are happening. And then we adopted Safe Agile, which I don't know who's familiar with that, but it was a way for the organization and leadership especially to have visibility into the work that teams were doing and what they were spending money on. Why are all these people here in an organization? What exactly are they doing? So 2 days every 10 weeks, teams would get in a room and like plot out the work that they had for the upcoming 10 weeks. So we did that for a while. And then lo and behold, there was kind of this revelation that, our teams are going to be closest to our customer. And how do we adopt a way for those teams to actually solve problems instead of leadership saying, here's your list of 50 things we have to prioritize for the next 10 weeks, but giving teams ownership, leadership leading with more of an objective, like, we need to increase our conversions on this page or something, or a website by 5%. Teams, go figure that out, figure out what problems you're going to solve and how we meet those objectives. So since January, maybe October, actually last year, we've been kind of working our way into more of this product-centric approach to allow those teams, those pods of devs, design leads, tech leads, product managers actually be assigned with the space or the journey or whatever within the platform that they would be responsible for to then meet those objectives. So I think it really kind of ties back to collaboration, and everyone's more or less a part of that strategy between that product manager, that design lead, and that tech lead. And you don't have like, okay, designer, go figure this out, but the product manager having an expertise, the tech lead having that expertise, and the design lead having that expertise to then come together to hear things differently and solve problems together. So it just kind of made me think of that evolution that we're going through. It's not revolutionary. Facebook's doing this, Google's doing this. You guys may be working in that way more or less, but a really big pivot for our organization to try to be innovative again, because kind of as the leading higher education brand for the past 45 years now, there's a lot of competition coming up, especially with COVID, online school. Okay, everyone's online now. So how do we reinvent ourselves to be more innovative going forward?
Yeah, it's all really great points. And I think the thing that I hear that really underscores a lot of it is that the collaboration of people is imperative to the evolution of what we're all doing, and that our understanding of tools is empowering us to know how we solve a problem. But even beyond that, when we think about how those things get adopted for some of us, it's our clients, for some of us, it's organizations. But how do you take data and actually make that into insights and then turn that into actions, right? And I think we could all agree that that is the imperative step we have to take in our process, is actually there's tons of data out there, but who rationalizes it, and who's actually the expertise within a team that can rationalize that, turn it into insights? And I think the answer is it's a group of people, and it should be, because we all have different perspectives, we all have different outcomes, and we all contribute to the solution. So I think all of your answers are fantastic. I think the evolution of design, UX, development, all congregating together to come up with solutions is the way of the future. And it, like you said, it's not revolutionary, but it's where everybody's aligning to. So let me jump to a question. This one, I'm going to target Brittany over there. It's not a hard one, don't worry. But I wanted to ask, in your focus on digital advertising and buying behavior, how does a well-executed user experience and technology influence the lead acquisition and the conversion? And I know on the owned media side, it's a little different, but yeah. I know you've played worn a lot of hats and played a lot of roles. So I think you have a great answer for that.
It's funny you focus on the conversion aspect after my last little spiel about post-conversion. But yeah, I mean, so my team's responsibility really is to make sure, so Pinnacle, just for context, spends over $350 million a year in advertising on behalf of our clients. And a large portion of that, probably 45 to 50%, is digital. So my team's responsibility is to make sure that some odd dollars is going to a website that's actually going to serve the hundreds of millions of dollars that you're spending justice when they get there. So if my team is overseeing a website, we really want to try to make sure that we're using, like you said, Sean, data and analytics to to really on an ongoing basis analyze where are people dropping off using Hotjar, even where are people looking on the site. I mean, we want to build these pages that are these giant single pages, and it sounds great from a design perspective or from a user perspective. Sometimes people are dropping off at the top quarter of the page and they're not even seeing any of the content that your team spent the last 6 months developing. So using tools like that really helps us gain some efficiencies for a starter, so that we're not developing a bunch of content that nobody's listening to, but it also really helps us narrow down where the drop off is happening. So I'm supporting a team that is really like opening the floodgates to all of this traffic to our sites and making sure that it's a frictionless experience when they get there. So we're looking at everything from site speed to path to conversion to customer journey, and then also analyzing the post conversion journey for loyalty and customer service and all of that, to make sure that each little step of the way we have a data point to not just analyze, but to then communicate back to the client and communicate back to our design and to our dev team, so that we have sort of that like full circle feedback, which I think is really important. I mean, you don't often get an analytics team that's actively meeting with your designers and with your developers to say, hey guys, you just built this awesome page, but nobody's converting on that page and nobody's reading the bottom half of that page. So we probably need to come back to the drawing board. It's actually made our conversations with our designers a little bit more cordial and a little bit less, you can't tell me what my design looks like. So it's taken the subjectivity out of design, which I've really enjoyed, because I'm much like some of my colleagues, I'm not a designer natively. I don't know how to develop. So I feel like I have just a unique perspective there.
Well, that's a really good point. And, I want to hear from Austin a little bit too on this subject of just when you're making decisions during the coding practices of user experience. So while you're working through the code, while you're just making decisions for the technology side of things, how often are you presented with a user experience decision point you have to make? And it may be one that you're going back to a designer to, or maybe one you're actually solving yourself. But in your work, compared to years ago, how often are you seeing this as a normal thing where you're actually thinking about design as part of your process?
Yeah, I would say almost daily, because on the team I work on, we have a pretty flat like structure as far as we still have our like project managers who are making sure everything's going right, but all the communication happens amongst, like, I'll talk directly to a designer if need be, talk directly to kind of breaking those barriers of having to go through like management to get to the designers and going back and forth. And that's been really helpful. Just like, say you click a button and an action happens, showing like designers might show a screen, the next screen, but maybe they just lapsed on like a success indicator or some sort of like loading state to show those things. So just getting like simple, small things like that, from all the way to decisions that designers may have in mind that might make the development take an extra 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and they might not realize it. And so just being able to have that open communication is extremely helpful, and has sped up my process a lot.
That's great. Yeah, I imagine it's a continuous process, but that, again, underscoring that collaboration point, if we can make that seamless and frictionless to collaborate, it makes moving through the coding process a lot faster. Yeah, I have a question. It's really kind of geared towards all of you, but I'll start with Leah on this one. Is because you work with a lot of clients directly, how much are we seeing clients and customers actually adopting more current and I guess current and modern user experience? How are they adopting it, I guess? Are you seeing them adopt it more? Or are you?
Yeah,
are
I
they
think if
paying
you would have
for it? Are
asked clients or stakeholders 5 years ago to invest more money in a complete user experience process, they would have thought, that's just a bunch of fluff. Make my website look good. Get me out on the market right now. But I think that, not just COVID and everybody working remote, but the internet in itself, I mean, any retailer probably has 8 different channels of ways that users interact with their brand and their purchases. So when you have that in mind and everything is digital, the entire idea about user experience, whether it comes from an app or their website or, there's all kinds of things now. So, you can purchase a product at the same place in, 8 different ways. There's 8 different ways that a user is going to interact with all 8 of those channels. I'm just using a random number 8, but could be 8, could be more, could be less. But, you know, that's a lot of things to consider. And I think, you know, back then there weren't as many channels. Now we've got social media. Now we have all these different things. And I think that there is more emphasis on it now than ever before. And I think that's why they kind of are saying, okay, we'll do this time. We'll do this research.
Brittany, how about you and your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, much of what she said, but I will say we have a good amount of clients who were resistant to evolution in general. I mean, they're thinking if it's not broke, don't fix it. My website converts fine. I have great sales, but I think COVID has forced a lot of that evolution, especially for brands that had in like actual location, like physical locations. I mean, you really have no choice but to evolve your digital experience. And I actually think that's been a blessing for a lot of brands. And I've enjoyed having the conversations with our clients where they're now asking for more research and they're asking for more data behind why they should be doing this. And meanwhile, I'm like, for the last 5 years, like, was my mic on? Was anybody listening to me? Like, that's what I've been saying. That's what I've been trying to tell you. But no, I mean, we're here, we've arrived, and I'm very happy for that.
I'm glad you brought up user research, because I actually have a question for you, Liz. It's just how has design and technology user research played a part in your role? Because I imagine there's quite a bit of it that goes before you decide to invest your teams into these areas. So how has that become a bigger part of your organization? And I guess what did you see as like the precipice of that happening?
Yeah, I kind of live in luxury as we have 2 senior UX researchers on staff that my team gets to work with all the time. So I feel like we went from maybe one like user study or so here and there, and now we've got like both of our researchers actively doing user studies like every week. I think we have some going on this week, someone will be doing one next week, and it's just kind of like continuous user research because we have so much to look at. I mean, between the 14 designers or 15, I can't even keep track right now, but between all those designers and things we have going on, we are very data driven and insight driven, and we want to hear from our customers. So now, like beyond even just senior UX researchers, it's like, okay, we don't want to spend time, you know, having these extensive user studies. Like we go through these motions, we, you know, get whatever data we can get, pull, synthesize, and then, okay, we design a thing, and then, okay, we put it through a user research study, which is more so validating or invalidating the work we've done. But what are those things we can do in between? So you're talking about Hotjar. I just saw Content Square, which we use, bought Hotjar, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. So we'll continue to leverage that, at least for our marketing website for phoenix.edu. But then there's like Usability Hub, user testing, like all those sorts of tools where you can, you know, go along, kind of put some ideas together, get them out there so that you can start understanding if these are worth investing in or not. So really it's kind of, for us, like the collaboration, kind of the efficiencies of what we're going to create. Like our organization wants to move really fast, but we're also like, let's slow down, let's do the right thing for you know, what our students are looking for. I lost my train of thought, but I'll stop there.
I can follow that a little bit. So yeah, it's really powerful, like on the front end to understand all the science and art behind the process of like creating your UX journeys. And then once you get to the development point, as developers, we also have some other tools that will do what's called like A/B testing. Which will allow us, like maybe the designers had 2 designs that they thought were great and could be really impactful, and they weren't sure which would convert best or which would keep users engaged the longest. And so what we can do as developers, and there's 10, 20 tools that'll do this for you. You can roll out maybe your website to half the users in one form and roll it out to the other half of users in another form. So like a good example of that would be like Instagram. So they did like the not showing the likes on the app. And so for a while they would roll that out to maybe 10, 20% of their user base, run some data around that and leave the rest of the user base on the original app. And so you can kind of see insights there as well.
It's kind of a big strategy we've adopted too, is like, we have our whole website live, right? But to be able to optimize it, you need to see how the new things are performing. So taking whatever's live now, putting it against one new thing or a new CTA or something to, we have apply now, but now we're like, oh, let's try ready to apply because maybe they aren't quite, but how can we push them a little bit further towards clicking apply now?
Exactly.
But yeah.
And if you were to say, of the projects, of the efforts where you conducted research, what percentage of those projects move forward because the research actually proved and validated versus not?
I wish I could say less projects move forward, but I feel like we've moved forward with pretty much everything. It's just which ones do we need to really kind of pivot and like, oh, maybe, this is what we thought that student wanted, but then we got terrible feedback. How do we shift some things a little bit based on the feedback we're getting and then put it out there again? Probably.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask too the question, and this is probably more towards the designers, but also to, I think, the others it influences. How often are you seeing testing and iterating in the design phase versus traditional process, which was you design, you hand it off to developers, you build it, and then, oh, let's test it now that we've spent time and money on it. Are you seeing testing and prototyping happening a lot more in the current state with your teams? Maybe we can start on that end.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, every client and every project is different, and sometimes there's allotted budget for that kind of stuff, and sometimes there isn't. But I mean, as a designer, you're already doing that when you're planning out how you're gonna, just your whole information architecture is kind of how you're planning all of that out. And then as far as testing, I mean, sometimes just between us designers, I'll want to show somebody something like, ooh, look what I'm looking at, or look what I'm working on. And I'll kind of put it in a little mock-up and I'm like, oh, that looks gross in that mock-up. I thought it looked good on screen. Let me fix this. Now I got to go fix everything. And now I'm swamped. But so yeah, I think you do it by nature, but I don't know if it's always done formally. I mean, it would be nice if it was, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense for certain things, unfortunately.
And I think we're kind of in a different context because we're asking our clients for the money to do that, where you guys are on product teams or not you.
Nope,
you're
gotta
on
ask my
product.
clients
Us
for
three. I meant us three. She's on a product team. So yeah, she has staff. She's on a product team. So yeah, like you said, you have people on staff who are doing that. So if you're paying them, you might as well like have them do their job. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's why I left the agency world, but
Dang it.
no, but I think it's been extremely powerful for in-house teams because that's really how they're going to, get those conversions and hopefully create those innovative ideas. Is not, I mean, yes, we have said process, but how are teams actually working to go through like these discovery and research activities? Okay, what are they learning there? Okay, what kinds of quick ideas can they come up with, which in a way follows kind of the design thinking methodology, but being able to ideate and then, okay, let's throw some of these things in front of our customers, or actually let's talk to the customers and learn about their experience. We've been kicking around the quote, oh gosh, now not the quote lady tonight. But Henry Ford's quote around like if help me out here.
If they asked.
Yes, if they would have asked.
If I would have asked them what they wanted,
they would have said faster horses. There we go. Yeah. So kind of okay. Well, let's think in that way, and how can we, then work together as a team to deliver on whatever that is.
Certainly a lot to think about there. And when I want to pivot this to is understanding the users themselves in your respective roles. So talking about user research, we're talking about our methodology and approaching design, approaching development. What are some key attributes that you feel you have to actually know about your customers before you can even make decisions? So what is it about them that you need to know? What are the 1 to 2 things that just lead the direction you always choose on your projects?
Look at me.
I'm looking at you. Yeah. We can start with someone else. Yeah.
I can take that. I think so part of my role is running an analytics team, and some of that we do research, but some of that is using some of the tools that we have to our disposal. I'm looking for the things that annoy our customers, honestly, the things that when they go to a website or when they're logging into a back-end system, make them say like, you know what, I'm out of here. Like it's just not worth it. So those are the things that it sounds dramatic, but like there is that moment for everybody on everything. It doesn't matter if you're a student, it doesn't matter if you're trying to buy a product, it doesn't matter if you're trying to manage your account or cancel a subscription. There is always a moment and a point of stoppature basically where it says, yeah, it's just not worth it for me. So I feel like my job is to try to eliminate that and to try to find what is the thing that annoys them the most about when they experience my brand so that I can eliminate that point of friction for them and make that, instead of a point of annoyance, a point of, it's an opportunity to gain more loyalty at any point.
I agree. I think pain points are a big part, but for design, I would say, what's the goal? You know, when I'm thinking about the end user, what's the goal? What's the goal? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to look at the big picture, or are we trying to look at what this product does? You know, and there's two different things. And you can talk with organizations that want to launch a product, website, or application, and sometimes, you know, you'll listen to what they say and how they want it to look, but you kind of have, there's a disconnect, because as much as you want to please the client, you know, you actually have to empathize with the end user. And so when I think about design decisions that I'm making, I'm thinking about that person, because as a user experience or user interface designer, you are supposed to be, you know, you're supposed to know everything about that product, right? You're creating their website, you're creating their application, you're creating something for them. I've never been a tax attorney, you know, like I've never done any of this stuff, but I'm supposed to be, you know, incredibly qualified for that product that I'm delivering to them. So what I have to do is I have to put myself into the end user's shoes and kind of juggle the client and the end user at times.
I think so. When I started at University of Phoenix, and I always make, well, anyway, I'm like, where are personas? So coming from the agency side, a lot of the teamwork that I was involved with or had, you know, at my disposal, it was like our teams were doing personas and customer journey maps, and you had all that information about that brand. And going to University of Phoenix, I'm like, all right, what are personas? Do we have a journey map? No? All right, well, they gave me some personas from like several years ago, and maybe they were still relevant, but I think that was a really awesome tool to have and continues to be. And we're going through this whole persona evolution again. But what was really interesting coming out of that is, and what I learned is our development teams that we had at the time, they didn't know who they were building anything for. Like, okay, it's a student, but who is the student? They're just like, this looks cool. What do you think? This works awesome. Like this, yeah, students will love this. But until we really had kind of this iteration of personas, which was 2 years ago, our teams really rallied around this persona, Rachel. So it bullets out her pain points, or what's about her, Rachel, yeah. So anyway, so it talks about who this person is, and it's a data collection of all of the students that kind of rolled up into this generic sort of character. And it was really cool to see our dev teams adopt that, because they made a hashtag Save Rachel. And so for a good 10 weeks, they were kind of going in and trying to figure out, what could they do to save Rachel, because she's a single mom, she has 2 kids, she has a full-time job, she's going back to school. So finally, like wrapping all those things up, then like, hey, okay, now we know who our user is, who our student is, and we can better empathize and figure out like, okay, what do we really need to do to save her time, in attending the university?
Yeah, I think the more we can understand our users and the variables that make us make decisions is extremely helpful. And I know at Vincit, we particularly adopt certain tools and survey methodologies and polls and various ways to gather that input. But, for me, it's if we can't understand the emotion that they're feeling when they're purchasing from your company or about to choose your service, or ultimately just choosing your company to gain information and knowledge from, that emotional connection we have with them, it just has to be accurate. Otherwise, there's so many competitors. Like you said, there's more competitors at the University of Phoenix. There's more competitors, a million competitors in our marketing and software, development world. So that's certainly a critical thinking point for a lot of us. And going to this, there's likely some people in our audience, there's likely some people online with our Zoom that are considering where they go next in their career, or considering how they evolve their own skill set. So I guess I'm interested to hear what you would suggest a user experience designer, or even, maybe even someone looking to go into software engineering. What would your advice be to someone looking to get into positions that we currently sit in, or they want to evolve their position they're currently in, to go further into user experience and go further into software development around this premise? So what advice would you give? And maybe I'll start with her.
Ooh, I'm not a designer, but I will say, tapping into sort of what, and a couple of my former employees are here too tonight, and they can hopefully back me up on this. But one of the things that I think is really underserved in the UI community, in the UX community, is content. So if you find yourself in a position where you're responsible for content strategy or content creation, or on the flip side, you find yourself responsible for something like technical SEO, there is a huge blend and a huge merriment of those two practices and those two disciplines. They have to work together. So one of the things that we did at my last agency was building a team where you have technically sound people who can do all the technical things. They can speak the technical SEO language, but they can also write. And that skill set, from what I found, is a rare breed. They almost don't exist out there. They exist in these little tiny pockets. So if you're someone that finds yourself in either of those two camps outside of just the design world, I would say if you're a content person, sharpen up your SEO skills. If you're an SEO person, sharpen up your content strategy and your content research skills so that you can partner with a designer and with a developer to create a better holistic web experience.
I would add on to that too. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Nielsen Norman Group, but they are all things user experience. So you can do their courses, get certification, so you're UX certified. But kind of where I'm going with that is they'll do full day courses, and you'll do breakouts and activities with people through Zoom. And something I thought that was really interesting were these product designers who were also being asked to write. So kind of building on that is, if you're not super strong in writing, like UX writing has really become a big thing, because you can't just go in there and write like a normal sentence that may not help your conversion or help your user kind of figure out what the next thing is to do. So I think that's what I would recommend. Like I went to school for graphic design a million years ago, it feels like, but kind of evolving to, okay, I've had a couple of graphic design positions. Now web is getting big. I got to become a web designer. How do I do that? So I went to Sitewire and did web design and interactive design. Okay, now this UX design thing is becoming a big thing. We're not quite able to offer it here. Where do I go find that? So also trying to figure out what are the trends and what's kind of big along your career journey, and kind of try and follow that.
And I know we're going to be wrapping up on time here shortly. So the last question that I really want to ask before we start to close up here is, beyond the traditional means of delivering user experiences, where do you see the future of this? And when I ask this, I mean, user experiences delivered clearly through web and mobile. We know that augmented and virtual reality are becoming, they've been around. We know they've been around. We've all seen it. We've toyed with it, but it's becoming more relevant, and actually people are figuring out how to use it and not be annoying. But even beyond that, do you guys see any area where user experience is now going to start taking even a bigger foothold? And whether this is a hybrid of physical and digital experiences, or if it's all online, or a combination of going from a mobile phone to a desktop to, whatever next experience. Any thoughts on new means of delivering user experiences that you're either excited for or see coming?
Yeah. We've got refrigerators that will keep track of everything of your grocery list, that will sync to your phone, that will even take a picture when you're at the store to wonder if you missed that product or if you need that gallon of milk.
That's a good one. For sure.
I'm saving my lunch money for that one. yeah, there's that. I mean, we already got watches that can, you know, tell you to calm down if your heart rate goes up. We've already got cars, you know, electric cars that, and then at the same time, all of these things are tracking your behavior and tailoring that experience to just you, or so you think, but just you. But yeah, I totally see that becoming incredible. You know, everybody looks at an interface, they be like, oh, this is so pretty. But when it's easy to use, you don't ever think, oh, this is such a great experience. You don't even think about it. So you just get excited about the new things that you can do with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's this, Google has a project called Solely right now. It's all about touchless interfaces. And that's something that I think has yet to really be fully explored. It really is based and surrounded on gestures and hand gestures using what's literally attached to your wrist and through their artificial intelligence. And I think what I've read about that project and everything that I've looked at is so fascinating. And I think we're really just at the beginnings of, I mean, we already talked about voice. We know that's there. We use Alexa, Siri, whoever we want to yell at when we're at home. But the touchless experience is something that is, I think, so cool. I think it's going to be awesome when we get there. So I'm excited for that evolution.
She said.
I didn't steal your thunder.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't have a great answer necessarily.
I
You
think
guys know
Austin
more
was
than
just
I do.
worried. He was like, how am I going to code all this?
Right.
I wish you could
I'm gonna
just
code the gesture.
take my mind and just code
Right.
it for me. Put it here and there.
I wish. I'm not quite that talented.
Yeah, I
That day
think
never comes, for your sake.
Right.
yeah, for me, I think it just comes back to personalization. Like it feels so, I don't know, just very immersed into the social media space, but not quite fully immersed into maybe like the app or web space. I don't know. It's kind of what I think about. And then someday self-driving cars, which sounds like they're here with some of the Uber efforts and things like that, but that'll be interesting. I mean, I don't know if the light rail drives itself yet, but I can see that coming a bit someday.
Yeah, I think Arizona has pioneered the Waymo. The company,
yeah.
and yeah, that's been quite an interesting thing to watch. But I agree. I mean, I personally am a huge proponent of the marrying of digital and physical together to the point like you made, Leah, of you don't even realize it's happening. It's just happening and you feel good about it. You feel good that you weren't annoyed. You feel good that you weren't bothered by some activity or thing you had to do, some thing you had to click or push. So I do, and I see that both technologists as software engineers and user experience designers and strategists on the business side of just making sure we're challenging our customers and our leadership. I like challenging our leadership too, to think a little bit differently than traditional means. So I applaud all of you in your space and the things you guys do for your customers and for your students and for your teammates on the teams that you work with, and just being able to collaborate so well. I get to watch it every day as part of this leadership team at Vincit. Belay gets to watch it every day, and we're all very inspired. And Rachel gets to keep hiring our lovely engineers and designers, so we're always looking for the best of those as well. But I want to thank you guys for joining me today. It's been a great discussion, and we hope to have more of these in the future. And want to invite you back either to join us for speaking or join us in the audience. And thank you to the audience that's joined us here today in person. We know it's an interesting time, and we appreciate you guys having the courage to come out and really let us see your faces and know that this is meaningful content for you as well. And for everybody online.
Do we want to do some Q&A?
Do we have time for Q&A? I think we should take some Q&A then. Let's do it. Whoever wants to stay for that.
There's just a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Going back to A/B testing, how do you decide between A/B testing and multi-arm bandits for deciding on new features?
Who would you like that to go to?
Anyone who knows what multi-arm bandits are.
More like multivariate testing versus A/B testing.
I guess another tool, this does not answer the question, but I guess I'll give something. Another tool we use, so A/B testing is if you want two separate, completely different experiences. But another thing we use is called feature flags. So if we just want to add one small feature to a subset of our users and not test it against a, what do you call like the base group. Control group. Thank you. Not when you're not testing necessarily against a control group, but you just want to start to slowly roll out a feature, maybe to certain users who have like a certain subscription or something of that nature. We can easily enable certain features for users, whether it's based on their account stuff or whether we have a testing group that we want to truly ensure a feature is working as expected and is delivering the value we think it is. But I'll make my homework tonight to understand what multivariant.
I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, usually like we've done this before for our homepage. So trying to figure out like what content hierarchy or CTAs. So we may have our control and then like an A, B, C, D version to really like dial in. I mean, it would go to 5% traffic here, 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 here. So we'd be able to dial in like, okay, what content in this placement is really converting? Is it, find your program? Like, do people really come to our homepage to find a program? Do they want to hear why University of Phoenix? Do they, et cetera, et cetera?
A few questions around careers. Regarding user experience careers or other similar technical careers, how many years of, I don't even know how to pronounce this word, autodidactic techniques or self-teaching did you commit to before getting to where you are professionally nowadays? So self-learning on the side, or how much time did you invest in yourself to get to where your career is?
Still learning, keep learning every day. I don't know, like I mentioned, going from graphic design to web design to UX design. Like I obviously didn't go to school for UX design. There's so many boot camps that have just popped out of nowhere for UX UI design right now. But then there's like, tools like Figma might have like a blog, or we use UXPin. They have a blog and tons of tutorials and tools and experts that do webinars, and so does Envision. So really just kind of like tapping into, I don't know, I have a list of resources I've been sending out to mentees, but just trying to like find little things every day is really what I'm doing. And I'm wowed by the design team that I have. I'm like, wow, I'd never be able to do all these things that this person just did, even though I call myself a UX designer.
I like, are you going next?
Go on.
I don't know. I love that question, just because it's kind of crazy to think about. Like 5-10 years ago, before like I create video content myself. I like teaching small developer things. And if you think about 5-10 years ago, if your team wanted to learn how to adopt maybe a new authentication mechanism or something of that nature, you'd have to call in a consultant, fly them out to your office, pay for their hotel, pay an hourly rate for them to teach you and everything. And nowadays you can get online and learn absolutely anything for $0 to almost $0. And so there's Google offers you UX designer pass for free on their website. Anyway, you can go anywhere and find absolutely free content. And companies are, as long as you got, if you don't have like a certificate showing that you've been through some accreditation or something, then having like a portfolio and showing, hey, this is what I've built, and having something to truly show can really pay dividends. I was basically self-taught for, I would say, like 80-90% of my skill set. So it's definitely really powerful.
And kind of continuing on that theme, for someone interested in transitioning to UX related career here in the future, what do you think, or what is your advice on pursuing the Google UX Design Professional Certificate course on Coursera?
Right.
Anyone?
I would say the certificates are fantastic, but there's a lot of people that need to make a decision if user experience is actually what they want to do, because I think UI, user interface design, which has a lot of emotions that you're playing on with colors and spacing and fonts and things like that, but the user experience job is people focused, it's testing focused, you're talking with the client, you're working with the client all the time, you're working with your internal teams, you are talking, you are working, you are understanding, empathizing. It's not about you, it's not about how cool you are, it's all about how cool they are. So a lot of humility comes with that too. So I think somewhere along the process you have to decide, do I want to be a user interface designer and design pretty things and work with these other people, or do I want to be a user experience designer? Or there's positions out there that kind of combine the two. But I mean, there's even positions out there like user researcher, where you're not even really doing the information architecture, you're just doing all of the research. It just depends on what organization that you work for. But I would say the courses are great, but if you have any kind of, self-discipline to be able to learn things on your own, that's applicable too. At the end of the day, it's about the portfolio. It's about showing how you can understand and empathize with your users. So yes, a degree, and yes, certificates are fantastic, but like we all know with anything, once you actually start doing it is when you really start to understand it. So you'll find out who you want to be during that process, I'm sure.
I've heard with the Google one specifically, it's very beginner, so foundational. Like, I think if anything, like if you're looking for a foundation, you want to kind of know how to get started, that may be a good resource.
So we have a few more questions, but I don't know if we want to pause here and we can follow up and email the panelists and have those posted on our Vincit Dev Talks if that works. Or the meet, we'll post on Vincit Dev Talks meetup. Before we wrap up though, I think Belay had a few closing words.
No, I don't, but I just I just saw that the camera points here, so I want to be in the camera. No, seriously, thank you to the panelists. Matt! Thank you, Sean. I have to say one remark about Sean. He wasn't involved 5 years ago when we started Vincit Dev Talks with 20 people in the audience. We followed up. It's a quarterly event. Before pandemic, we had 150 people in the audience. And glad to have Sean. I look up to you, by the way, in many ways, and you guys as well. But yeah, before we organized this, he asked seriously, like, do you know any good moderators? And I was like, you. He's natural. He's a talent. Big hand to Matt. No. Here behind the desk, setting up all the audio. Nowadays we are hybrid, we are online, we are live, and big hand to Matt. And again, Rachel. Matt. And now you can come here, and because I want to thank you, Matt.
The real Matt.
The real Matt. Thank you for letting us use your space. This is awesome. We have to be here again, and I know you all had many other places where you were supposed to be. Oh no, you wanted. No, I'm not left. But like taking everything I've said back. Thank you for coming. Thank you for panel listening. Thank you for hosting. I hope to see you again and look up to you. Thank you.
Thank you.